Hi, this is the Loudest Crow. I'm Jonathan Louderback, and
I'm Justin Kroh, and we're here to caw through the noise.
a day late because of me, but I figure we'll talk about our week first because it's kind of interesting. I started substitute teaching, and something I've discovered is if we were gonna, do this a bit later on Friday, to have a full day from 8:30 to 4. It is being a teacher is even a substitute teacher was emotionally exhausting.
Emotionally exhausted. And you were dealing with
Yeah.
middle schoolers, correct?
Middle schoolers. It was actually special education middle schoolers too,
Hmm.
and they weren't bad kids. They were actually really good kids, but being emotionally available with the same kids with no breaks for 7 hours was kind of intense, especially for a first timer. And I'm an introvert, I'm the type of guy that has I have my certain number of spoons. So I got home and I was just like, okay, I I'm done for the day. I'm tuning out. Uh, so here we are on Saturday doing this, but it really made me commiserate a bit more because you'll run into those cranky, crabby teachers from time to time, or the teachers that's lost his patience are like, oh, what an asshole. It's like I kind of get it now.
You
Not
kinda get it
that I
now.
think I ever will, but I can understand where that sort of like behavior stems from. I think it's very important to try and empathize with even assholes. You
Yeah.
know? Try and get in their head and try and see the human in them.
No, I totally agree. And not even just to see the human in them, but to try and bring it out if you can.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, that's what working at McDonald's taught me to do, because I was like, okay, now I know why a lot of people who work at McDonald's seem a little bit cranky. So the best I can do is try to, like, put them in a better mood if
Yeah.
they can't put me in a better mood.
And that was actually a very powerful sentence. It's to bring the human out of them,
Ugh.
if you can. That's really good. I feel like that needs to be written down somewhere.
Yeah, the Bible.
Is it really like? Is that? Did you
Well,
just quote verbatim the Bible?
Not
I should-
verbatim,
I should-
but...
Sorry, I always use the Bible, but you're a Christian, so I should respect that. The Bible. Oh, are you the type of guy that gets offended if I say Bible?
I am not.
Okay,
you
good.
are
I
all
will,
good.
I will refer to it as the Bible now.
Sometimes I call it the Bible because it's fun.
Yeah, I mean it's just a word. I like playing with words.
But yeah, no, like those words, like in the order that I said them, no, those aren't in the Bible. But the Bible does say, like, you got to go and make, shepherds out of people, right? You have to kind of foster the love of God, or what an atheist would call it, like the good in people, right? It's just that Christians believe the good in people is God. So, but yeah,
Interesting.
no,
Yeah, very interesting.
I think it's like I was talking to my parents about it last night. I think it's really cool that you're substitute teaching.
It's crazy. I'll talk more about that in a second. Finish your thought.
But yeah, like Eli and I have been talking about it a little bit. All those personality tests I take, I get ENFJ, and it says, "Oh, you'd be a perfect teacher." Every single one, without fail, I get ENFJ. I don't think I've ever gotten anything else on the Myers-Briggs test, and I've taken it like over the course of the last 5 years too. And they say, "Oh, sometimes it might change as you grow older." No, hasn't changed, at least not yet. But Eli and I have talked about it, and Eli was like, "They're giving substitute teachers a lot of money, and they are not limiting the qualifications to be a substitute teacher, like, almost at all. Because according to him, you need, what, like 36 credit hours?
36 credit hours, or you could take a DESE, or the Department of Missouri Education approved college class before you even have 36 credit hours.
That's
Or
crazy.
you could be a military veteran.
That's crazy. I mean, like, with the 36 credit hours, thanks to dual enrollment, I had that before it even started at Drury.
You could have theoretically this year, been a substitute teacher if you wanted to.
Man, that's crazy. And I don't know if I'd want to. I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to. It's something I would be willing to do at some point. I just don't know what that point would be.
It's definitely me being a substitute makes sense because I'm going into teaching, getting the experience early, getting the connections, getting over those initial growing pains about being a teacher and what that really is like outside of the fantasy in my head. I think it's really valuable. I think for your average person though, it could be a nice paying side job for a college kid, which is a very good benefit. But it is one of those jobs that you really do have to have a certain type of, like you said, you have to have a certain type of personality for. And what I think happens is a lot of people, whether it's substituting, whether it's actually being in the classroom, being a tenured educator, they get in there and they're thinking about the benefits. They're thinking about the summers off. They're thinking about the consistent holidays off. They're thinking about the tenure and the pension and all that sort of stuff. And they forget that at the end of the day, they still have to be in the classroom, massively impacting the lives of their kids. It's like I sat down And I was about 2 hours into my day today. It was only 3 kids in my classroom, being a special education classroom. And I remember thinking to myself, these are my kids. Maybe it's just for now, but these are my kids. Like, I need to do right by them in this short span of time, the best I can. And even if I never see them again, I can't use that as justification to be a bad teacher. And of course, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing because of the state of qualifications to become a teacher, but I tried my best and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of teachers, a lot of substitutes, a lot of people in the district and the education system countrywide, they forget the fundamental core of why you're there, right? They treat it as a 9 to 5, and whenever you treat that as a 9 to 5, the kids lose out. Damn shame,
They really do. Benefits are blinding, I think. Like, when going into anything, like, if you're just focusing on those benefits, you're going to lose sight of the bigger picture. And that in and of itself can, like, keep you from getting the full enjoyment out of the experience. I haven't substitute taught, but I did take care of kids during church when I was in middle school, and I was taking care of, like, the kindergarten through second graders. And I really enjoyed it. It does drain you, like, especially when they're young and full of energy on a Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also super rewarding.
It is very rewarding.
To be there with them and to put in the effort and to try and understand them and help them understand what you want them to understand. Like every teacher I've ever had who has talked to their students about the teaching experience loves those light bulb moments. That term gets thrown around all the time, and it is very true. And I don't know if you've been able to see that simply because you've been substitute teaching, like 2 days?
Yeah, only 2 days. I really haven't. I think as a substitute teacher, I am very rarely going to be the actual supplier of those light bulb moments because of the state of education post-COVID. It is very easy for a teacher to, and especially based on the state of the substitute teaching pool, like, as a teacher, you have no clue the guy or gal, unless you personally requested for them, who's going to come into your class and teach it. So the mentality is very much, let me make something online, or let me make something pre-prepared that my students already know what they need to do. That way, when I'm gone, like, whenever I get back, I'm not stepping into a new classroom, one that I have no idea where the students are at. So, for example, on Wednesday, I walked in and they had some warm-up on this online program that they were working on, followed by 2 videos that were prepared by the teacher. And is that a bad experience? I necessarily want to teach them math? No, but it definitely takes control out of your hand as a substitute. And on those light bulb moments and on that, like, losing sight of what's awesome about teaching, I think that teaching is probably one of the most rewarding careers, one of the most immediately rewarding careers that you could possibly do. I think that a lot of STEM, a lot of clerical work, working in bureaucracy, you very rarely get to see the direct impacts of your actions.
That's exactly
compared
what I was
to the way that you do in the classroom. Like, you step into the classroom, you teach a lesson, and maybe no one gets it at first, but as you walk around as they're studying on their own and as you're helping them out, you get to see, like, 15 separate momentous occasions in one time. Like, my mom's a kindergarten teacher, and she told me that, like, she loves the end of the year because she has seen the product of all of her work. For these kids that have never been to school before, all the skills that she's imparted upon them are her, right? And there's not much more rewarding than that.
It is super cool. And yeah, you nailed it on the head there. Like, teaching is just, again, you see the direct benefits of your actions more so than pretty much any other career.
Mm-hmm.
And those actions in and of themselves are just very, very, like, impactful.
And positive.
Well,
yeah. As long as you're, like, we're talking about good teachers.
Yeah, good teachers.
It's just such a positive thing. Yeah.
I think I've mentioned him a couple times before, but math professor that I have a jury named Matt that we call Math Jesus. Great guy, Dr. Joe Dillstrom. And he was my substitute teacher at the end of my 8th grade year for my Algebra 2 class. And because our normal teacher had to go on maternity leave, so he filled in for her for the last couple months. And if you remember, like, a lot of the end-of-year topics in math in high school were like the random grab bag ones, like probability and combinations and stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff that didn't necessarily fit into the, like, because they try and develop a curriculum that, like, builds, and those are the ones that are, like, outside of the.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, because he was teaching me all that then, here I am now, freshman over at Drury. He's my professor in discrete math, And discrete math is pretty much the class that focuses on all those extra things that come at the end of those courses. And we had a lesson this week. As I was looking at it, I was looking at what he was writing on the board. I raised my hand and I was like, Dr. Joe Dillstrom, you taught me this stuff 5 years ago. And he just kind of paused and was like, what? I was like, yeah, no, 5 years ago over at Central, you taught me this. The end of Algebra 2. And then he just kind of like, I could almost like feel him glowing, right? When I said that. But before we had this lesson in particular, I was like already kind of picking up on a lot of the things he was writing down. And like, oh yeah, I remember this. Well, I hadn't thought about where I remembered it from.
Yeah, you were like, well, this sounds so familiar.
Yeah. And so when I finally like realized where I knew this from and told him, like, the way he put it was, and I thought I wasn't going to cry today, Justin. But I think it is just so cool because, like you said, you don't know if you're ever going to like see these kids again.
Yeah.
Or if you'll ever be able to see what impact that has 1, 2, 3 years down the line. But I think just the chance that could happen again, and that you could see those effects happen is really cool. I always imagine myself becoming like someone super successful, and then my teachers being like, I taught him. I had him. I know him. Right? And like I think of them like right after my parents, basically, because of the people in my life who built me up. They are right there below my parents, which I do think is important. I think unfortunately for a lot of students, the teacher kind of becomes their parent almost.
In a major way. I think that's a symptom of the lack of respect that teachers receive in our society. Because I think that the mandatory nature of education has made a lot of parents, especially those in poor socioeconomic situations, see school, that's by the way, as babysitting, right? And whenever that's the situation, whenever that's the case, a lot of parents don't necessarily have the time, even if they do care about education, they just don't have the time to really ask the questions, to be involved as they should be, to get those best outcomes for their students, for their kids. So they send their kids to school, they come back, that's it. That's all the schooling experience is. So oftentimes, in my experience, you have kids who have totally different, like, personalities whenever they're at home versus whenever they're at school. And a teacher almost has to cultivate the school personality to be as successful as possible. And on what you're talking about, like, never seeing the impact of your actions, I've always wanted to. I really need to. But I was one of the last kids in my first grade class to read. Which, you know, I'm not saying this, like, braggadociously or anything, but being the voracious reader I am nowadays, it's kind of weird to think, oh, man, I was behind in that. But I was the last one. And it is, I could say with much confidence that my teacher, the one who was patient with me, I never felt like I was stupid because of her. Because, you know, sometimes when you get behind, you could get those negative emotions. I never felt like I was behind because of her or anything like that. She was always so patient and encouraging for me and really allowed me to go over that hurdle. Mrs. Downing. And whenever I finally did, by the next year I was reading, you know, Percy Jackson and stuff in class. And I remember every year since then I've looked back and thought to myself, where would I be without her? What would I have been without her? Because I can actually trace a lot of like the foundational shifts in my character to several different books that I have read throughout my life.
That's actually really interesting.
So if I hadn't been able to read those books, even if I only been able to read those books later, where would I be? And I think that it is the teacher's curse, especially in earlier education. Like, this is what my mom probably experiences. Like, you are the one that is laying the foundations for what might be a mighty skyscraper. And one day it very well may be a mighty skyscraper. But when it is, it's hard to look down and remember what the base was and who put it there. It's very easy to remember, like, our, you know, higher level teachers, especially because of the recency bias, but also just because our memories, our brains are literally more formed at those stages. But a lot of these teachers work this thankless job where society thinks them babysitters, developing this crucial groundwork for so many human beings. And yet, you know, nothing. So teachers should be heroes. And
they are. I won't even say that. I'd say they are heroes.
Depending on the person. To a person going to college, to a person seeking higher education who loves education, yeah, I think they are. And that is a chunk of the population. But look at the majority of society. And I'm not the type of like pessimistic person that's like, oh, all people are stupid. More in the sense that a lot of people haven't had the opportunities, they didn't have those light bulb moments that at the right times to make them really appreciate getting a higher education. Like, I think the classical example is people who hate math, and they get to high school and they're like, oh, I suck at math. That's like 90% of the school population. Like, I suck at math. The only reason they think that, there's probably tons of people who could be scientists and mathematicians in that group. It's just how they were developed, right? And the moments they had, and whether their parents pushed them, and whether they had the right teacher who just so happened to get through and show them what was up. And I wouldn't say most of the population thinks teachers are stupid or lazy or whatever, but I do think the majority of the population sees teachers as a job that is replaceable by people with less professionalism and experience. They see it as something that we can downsize on and still get the same impacts from. And you see the examples of that all the time.
Which is really troubling, because teachers are literally the ones who are building up future generations. And so by saying, oh, that's a job anyone can do, well, no, it's not.
It really isn't.
And you know, that brings us to the whole point of, like, teachers do not get paid enough to do what they do. They really don't. And it's sad, because teachers are such a crucial component of our society. Even if a teacher, like with homeschool, even if a teacher is a parent, like the art, because it is an art form, the art of teaching is just so valuable, and it does seem to be undervalued by so many. I can still name, I think, all of my teachers, like, right now if I wanted to. I won't. But, like, I'll at least do, like, elementary school, kindergarten, Winkowski, first grade, Peyton, second, Wadsworth, third, Finkel/Dougherty, fourth, that was Schofield, and fifth, Pope. Like, and then I could go through middle school and high school, but that's too many.
I can remember all the teachers I had that had impact on me. Or at least the ones that I truly, that snap out of my memory.
And that's a weird thing, too, because I feel like lots of teachers, I feel like any teacher can have impact. But I think all teachers should be the one who has the most, the teacher should bring the impact to the students, as opposed to the students searching for the impact in the teacher.
Well, it's two things. First, I want to mention that I had a very eye-opening experience. I talked a lot because being a special education classroom,
If you talked a lot, it was a mouth-opening experience, not an eye-opening experience, John.
Fair enough. Mouth-opening experience. But I had one teacher who was still there because it was a two-teacher classroom. And so on downtime, I talked a lot to her. And I won't go into details because it'd be rude, but, like, obviously there's a lot of gossip. Like, I saw the human aspect behind her. And it really opened my eyes to how, like, we do talk about teaching a lot. We talk about it a lot. But at the end of the day, there are humans. And there are going to be times where you're not at your A game, which is understandable. But it's like one of those jobs where whenever you're not at your A game, you're, like, permanently affecting people for the rest of life. So it's kind of stressful. And two, I had a really wonderful conversation with my mom last night, and she kind of gave me some of her wisdom. She's been teaching for probably about 8 odd years, maybe 9, in kindergarten. And she told me, every student you have is a learning experience. And every student you have will teach you just a little bit more about how human beings learn.
I wouldn't even limit it to how human beings learn. I'd just say how human beings are.
Both, I'd say. But having that direct hands-on experience is so much more valuable than the in-classroom education will ever be. Because I think the education informs the experience. Like, you can't just have the experience and be a successful teacher. You have to have the education. But I think that I would prefer a teacher who had only experience over a teacher that had only education. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's true in the sense that, like, think of the teachers you've had that have been super strict and super, like, we need to meet these goals, let's get this done, boom, 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 versus the teachers who are like, you know what? I just want you guys to take some of the valuable stuff away from this class, and if you do, I'm happy. It gets more that way in college, I found. Like,
yeah.
A lot of teachers who are like, yeah, just get in whenever. I don't really care. I just want you to do it.
Which I think is very telling about, like, the differences between, like, colleges and how they can kind of just run their own show, as opposed to, like, the early education and high schools, at least in our district, that have all these, expectations that they have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there have to be this many students with this kind of grade, and they have to get this kind of test score. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why, a lot of children and teenagers don't like K through 12. It's because they are forced they have all these weird expectations and these kind of arbitrary metrics forced onto them, so that way they feel more like a statistic than anything else.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely what I felt like.
Yeah, it's just dehumanizing.
I think that you're forced to be there, forced to take tests, forced to take classes you don't want to take, forced to interact with people you don't like, and you're supposed to do it all while succeeding.
One thing that you just said, this actually ties perfectly into something I was going to go off on. Being forced to interact with people you don't like. I think that is a great thing. I think that is, because in my intro to philosophy class, we talked a lot about how, social politics is, when you think about it, the most important science. Because it's about how to interact with people and how to make decisions that impact those people in a healthy way. And from a very early age, one of the things that the school system does is it throws us into a room with a bunch of other people, and we are forced into building social skills. In that sense, I think homeschool is much more viable nowadays than it ever has been with all the online resources. But what that fails to do is instill children with good social skills, and those are crucial. You have to know how to interact with people, how to handle your own emotions, how to handle their emotions. You have to know how to compromise. That's a huge thing that kids learn. You have to know how to disagree with someone politely. You have to know what to do when you don't like someone. And you have to figure out how to treat them nicely and with respect, even if you don't want to. Because that's what you got to do in the real world. If you don't like your boss, that sucks. Like, unless you can get another job, you just have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you have bad coworkers, you just got to deal with that, right? You have to deal with people in pretty much any way. In pretty much any profession, in pretty much any area of your life, even. Of course, like, you got hermits and stuff who don't, but like
unless you are a sought after artisan of some variety, the only people I have found who can get away with being just outwardly rude to people are your Gordon Ramsays and stuff like that. And that's because they ply an art so well that people respect them even though they're assholes. But you're right, most people can't get away with being poorly socially adjusted. And I do agree that being forced to interact with people you don't like is a valuable skill, but it still makes people not want to be there.
You are right, yeah.
But more on what you're to escape from that and go more into what you're talking about. I think that I wanted to mention about homeschoolers. That's where my thought was going. It's like homeschoolers. I've seen literally the entire spectrum, and I've seen people coming from the same homeschooling environment get different outcomes. It's really interesting how much it's like being in a K through 12 environment, being away from your parents. Totally, like I told you earlier, you have that different school persona, allows you to develop yourself a bit more independently, a bit earlier, socially and stuff. But I think that being a homeschooler is one of those things that depends entirely upon the one teacher that you'll ever have, which is one of your parents. Usually, anyway. It's usually not both. And that creates much more dramatic outcomes, either to the socially unadapted or socially adapted outcomes. I also think that socialization is one of those weird things that I think it is overall societally a net positive that everyone is thrown into the same situation, or at least most people. They're thrown into these schools and they're forced to interact with people. But I do think there are people who maybe fall out of the normative, the mental normative bell curve, or fall on the edges of the normative bell curve, who are very disserviced by being forced to interact in these ways. I think that there are Gordon Ramsays, there are artisans, people who would, in ancient times, live up in the mountains, perfecting their cobbling skills, who, instead, being forced to adapt to our societal standards, really fail, and really struggle, and really develop multiple bad things that happen to them. And I think a great example of how that works out is, the fact that not every society functions socially the same way that ours does. There are several societies in Asia, for example, that are much more introverted than ours is. And I think that there are many people who, maybe if they were forced to socialize over there, would be more successful than they were over here, and vice versa. So I think it's just one of those things that's so circumstantial on the individual.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you bring up Asia, and that kind of difference of culture because my friend Evan, he's taking a Confucianism class, and if they're more introverted, because I don't know, that's interesting because at least when it comes to education, they are also a lot more community oriented.
Well, yeah, they're much
Than
more.
us.
You can finish your thought. I'm missing
Well,
more.
and I guess that kind of makes sense because, you know, America and more Western nations, we kind of value independence, but to be strong as an independent, extroversion helps you a lot, because you still need support from people, even if you want to be independent.
America values leaders. People, you get people to follow you, even
Yeah,
though you're not supposed to follow others.
yeah. And then with more Asian cultures, it's more like everyone's kind of introverted, and so, or there's at least an introvert mentality that kind of hangs around. So these introverts have to team up with others to have strength. And there's pros and cons to both ways of thinking, because I think valuing leadership qualities or valuing the qualities of a leader is important. But then what do you do with people who don't want to be leaders? Whereas valuing a community, a sense of community with others, is also important. But then what happens when someone has to lead?
Yeah, I think both societies, of course, like because we're talking more about theoreticals, they have examples of both types of people succeeding. But I do think in the circumstance of a schooling, of these early foundational fundamental years, like I remember these feelings of lack of fitting in, of lack of belonging, and I think some people never grow out of it and they never find their group. And depending on society, it could be harder for them to grow out of that, and some never do. I think that, and I will say, I think our society definitely has a distinct problem because, and this is kind of going to bleed into another subject, but I think you look at the number of school-aged people who are shooting up schools. I think that foundationally, that's not necessarily a problem of guns. I think that does contribute to the ability of these people to do so much damage, but more so it has to do with the way our societal standards feed into creating people with these negative outcomes, right? It's like you don't see people in Japan, even if they hate their school, you know, grabbing a gun and shooting it up. Part of that's a good part of that's because they don't have access to guns, but a good part of that too is just a difference in social mentality. That's pretty much my thought so far.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know where to jump off that. It's like because I think it's like you look at people who have these like this because that's like the extreme negative outcome.
It is extremely.
It is definitely the furthest it goes, but in America, it's not uncommon. It's not like, well, is it uncommon, but is it like as rare as it should be? No.
It should be much rarer.
Yes, it is unfortunately common for how rare it should be.
Yeah.
And I think that the number of times that you've seen similar types of people perpetuating similar types of crimes, you really need to start noticing the pattern. And if you look at the number of socially non-normative white teenage boys who get access to firearms who then go to shoot up their school, there is a pattern that is formed in this country, and it's like, how do we address that? Not only from because I think I personally believe in more. I don't believe in like taking away guns or anything like that, of course, but I do believe in more stringent gun control. But even outside of that, right? Because I don't think that's the full story. I think that even if I had to choose one thing to address to solve the problem, it wouldn't be guns. It would be the mental health societal stuff that goes into developing these types of people.
I think a big thing that marks these school shooters that we run into, because we've actually kind of started an interesting discussion here. I think a big thing is seeking attention, right? And I think one thing that teachers are obligated to do in these education systems is to provide that attention, to make children feel like they are being helped, like they need to be, and that there's someone out there looking out for them and someone who cares about them. And what's interesting is that these school shootings started getting much more common. I think it was really after Sandy Hook, because
Copycats.
Because copycats, yeah, they see this stuff, they hear the word gets spread about it. Dominates the news cycle for a long time. Not that it's not like newsworthy, like people should know when this stuff happens, but just a consequence of that is kids will see that and be like, this kid got in the news by doing this. I need to feel seen. I have not felt seen my whole life. I'm going to do something to feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And like 99 cases out of 100, they immediately regret it. But like they probably regret it the second they step into the building before they even shoot a bullet. But then they consider, well,
I've gone too far.
I've gone too far already. I have to finish the job.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
I remember recently there was Uvalde, Texas. Yeah, it was the most recent. It was the most recent like major one where you had that guy going to the elementary school and the whole stuff with the police officers happened. And I think that was an interesting circumstance because that was a kid who generally was still a kid who wasn't even shooting up his own school. I think you usually see that pattern of people who are disenfranchised by the building and they hate the people there. They hate the culture there so much they get to the point where they feel that's their only recourse. But it's gotten to the point where people are doing it outside of that. Like I think he had graduated. He was working at McDonald's or whatever.
That's a weird thing. There are a lot of graduates who do that.
I think that our society has cultivated is very individualistic, is very leader based. If you're not a leader, if you're not extroverted, if you're not socially adapted, then oftentimes you are left behind by society.
You're not worthy of attention.
You're not worthy of attention. Because I think our society has, like, it's something I've noticed getting older, is like you have to reach out your hand to get things. It's almost never a situation where institutions or people are reaching out to you unless you're truly something like that's super high up there, unless you're like super successful. You have to apply for the scholarships. You have to do all these things. And for some people that can be agonizing, right? To put themselves into these awkward social situations. It's a skill you have to learn and some people never acquire it. And I think that those people who maybe have parents who are overburdened just by, just couldn't raise them right, or maybe they were terrible people, both circumstances exist, and these kids, they get through the school system having never been heard by overburdened, underpaid teachers who try their best, but they have a trouble kid, and they at the end of the day, some of them decide, well, I gotta focus on the other kids more. So they just don't deal with the trouble kid, they send them to the office. And that kid gets all the way through the school system, having never been helped, having never been heard by one person, having never been assisted in developing who they could be. And of course there's resentment. Of course there's hate. And if you get, and it's one of the unfortunate tragedies of this country, if you're not taught what you can do in school, or at least showed the opportunities that you can pursue, most people will never pursue higher opportunities. It doesn't have to be college, but most people never will. They get out of high school and then they look at life and they're like, what do I do now? What's here?
And I think the hardest element of what you're talking about here is that you can't really point to any person or any one. Well, I can't even say institution because they're kind of made of the people. You can't point to anyone and blame it on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have these children who get out of the school system, don't know what to do, because there are those problems in the world where people just love pointing fingers and blaming something or some
mm-hmm.
people on it, and that has its own problems. But with this one, you can't even do that.
It's
right?
just the issue is so foundational. It just stems so deep from something, and you can make 1,000 changes, it might still happen. Because nowadays, school shootings, as tragic as they sound, have become a part of American culture. Really? When's the last time you were truly shocked by a school shooting when it happened? That you were appalled and just taken aback?
Like middle school, probably. Yeah.
But every time after that, there's another one.
Yeah, South Park has that whole gag where Stan gets home and is like, "Oh yeah, there's a shooting at school today," and his mom is freaking out, and everyone else in the family is like, "What? What are you like? Are you going through something? What's going on? You're freaking out about nothing," because it really desensitizes people, which is sad, because it feels like we should be so much more emotional about this thing happening, but because it's like you said, almost a part of culture now. We can't afford to be emotionally invested in every school shooting that happens.
Because it would destroy us, right? Like, say, for example, you live in a space and you could live your entire life, because, they are still rare on a population or a statistical standpoint. In the sense, it's kind of like being struck by lightning. I'm not sure if the odds are the same, but it's kind of similar. You may go your entire life only hearing about them in different towns, in different parts of the country. And in that circumstance, why would you divest yourself from being invested in your life to truly become so invested in something like that? Because it just seems like such an abstract issue until it's your school that's getting shot up, until it's your child that's walking into the building who doesn't come home that day. I remember the closest brush that we had at our school, and I'm just not saying names just for the sake of, doxing and all that, was there was that school shooting threat one day where a kid walked onto the campus and then the entire school shut down.
Yeah.
I was actually out of the building. I was at a debate tournament. It was like sophomore
Oh.
year, probably your freshman year.
It was my freshman year. Yes, I remember distinctly. I was with my buddy Evan. We turned off all lights in the classroom. We held them back and we grabbed some textbooks and we're like, "We'll do what we need to do."
Because most kids like were just accepting of the fact that like this could be a school shooting. Like no one knew, but it just could have been. Kids were texting their parents.
It was tense. Yeah.
Yeah, they're texting their parents and saying, "I'm scared. I don't know what's going on," and their parents were driving to the school.
Yeah.
Right, which is totally not what you should do.
I was about to say, it's like I get why, but
it's like that's like probably one of the worst things. You're clogging, but still, it's. But after that was done, after it was realized it was just a kid being stupid and getting on campus like a former graduate, after people realized it was just mostly a drill, went back to class.
And we talked about it for a little while, but then we just almost forgot about it.
Yeah.
Get
on with your life.
Yeah. This reminds me, just to like really hit this point home. Sometime earlier this month, there was a speech and debate tournament in Glendale, and there were shots fired, like
I heard about
outside.
that. Actually, I did hear about that.
And it wasn't a school shooting per se. Like they weren't like in the school doing it, but the fact that there's a firearm going off that close to a school alone is scary, right? And that does bring us to that gun control conversation. Don't want to hang on it for too long because there are enough people who talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the issues where I really just don't know. I can't say I belong to any kind of side with that debate anymore because, there's so much conflicting evidence. Because I think just human behavior is often so conflicting. Because you have countries like Canada who do limit gun control and gun violence has gone down. And it hasn't been replaced by other kinds of violence either, at least not as much as you might expect. But then there are places like Mexico who have tried gun control measures, but when they did, gun violence got worse. And so it's like, what do we do? These countries that are right next to us have completely different outcomes with these decisions that they're making. It's like,
I don't think societally that. So, for example, in Australia, I believe I'm not sure if they banned sidearms, but I know for a fact that they had a school shooting or shooting of some variety about 10 years ago, 2012, I believe. And the conservative government of the time took extreme measures to ban long arms or just ban guns, and mostly they had a gun buyback program, and they did. It was like you saw pictures of these massive mounds of guns just thrown haphazardly into piles, obviously, hopefully unloaded. And I look at that, and since then, the number of shootings they've had has gone down to like zero. At least it was like that way for 10 years, which is incredible numbers, especially when compared to the United States. And you look at that, you're like, that has to be the solution. But applying something like that to America would be way different. First off, there's like 130 guns per 100 Americans. There are more guns in this country than living people.
That's shocking.
Like it's like the closest country is like 25 guns per 100 people. We are 130 guns.
That's crazy,
right? On average, one person owns more than one gun, which it's a systemic part of American culture and society, and so I don't think that a government buyback program or anything like that is ever going to happen.
No,
what's unfortunate
it's just not realistic.
I don't think that like the actual political conversation has ever really been like we should buy back guns. There's probably a few pundits who've said stuff like that, but it's always been at least since the school shootings for the past few years in my state, the Democrats have been like we need more strict gun control, which translates to more strict background checks, higher age limit for buying guns, restrictions on certain types of guns that you don't necessarily need for recreational hunting and the variety. And then the conservatives are like they're coming to take our guns. Look at Australia, that's what they're going to do here. Dude, if they try to buy back the guns, we'd go bankrupt. That's how many guns there are. Like, there's no feasible way that they will ever buy back guns because there's so many fucking guns.
There's so many guns.
Like, that would be such a process, dude.
Well, in something that I've been thinking about recently. Well, when I say recently, like in this conversation, is one thing I'm grateful for were our school police officers, because I think just having that kind of presence in a school drastically lowers the likelihood that a kid's going to go in there, because then they're like, well, if I try to do something, I might not even get off the ground.
Well, remember, a lot of kids, two things. A lot of kids, when they do school shootings, like, as soon as they fire the gun, they're like, I'm committing suicide. It's like a murder-suicide situation.
Yeah.
So, in that circumstance, having the police officer there can, assist in that suicide. Secondly, and this is interesting. I think a lot of topics we've been talking about are very relevant to our age group, right? But we went to a primarily white school.
We did.
And the experience that we had with police officers is different than a predominantly like black school would have.
That's true.
Like I don't think we ever saw an arrest in the hallways, but like at school, school resource officers have been known all across the country to just arrest kids for no fucking reason, right? In usually predominantly black schools. Like I think I remember our school resource officer was a big, like, relatively pudgy, happy fellow. Like I never really felt intimidated by him. But it was just totally a different situation. I don't necessarily think, because I have seen a few videos on the topic, I don't necessarily think that removing school resource officers is viable, especially because the school shooting situation is kind of that weird middle ground. But I do think that they're not the solution. If anything, they're a Band-Aid. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's sort of what I was going at. I wasn't saying, like obviously these problems could still easily happen even with the presence of school officers, but it does help a little bit. It is really what I was getting at. And, but like you said, like, the guns, there's such a surface level problem in this issue, because you have to get down to, well, why are people using these guns? What are the issues with those people? What created those issues? So on and so forth. And that's why I really don't know what to think of the gun control debate, because it feels like the only reason that debate exists is because of so many sub-problems. And there are a lot of hot-button topics nowadays in the political sphere that are focused on those surface-level issues that are constituted by much deeper problems.
Yeah, like they're focused on... So every time that a school shooting happens, the gun control debate pops back up for like a couple months. Nothing happens, and then it dies down again. I think that politicians are... I would say suffering, but I don't really think a politician can suffer because politician. But they are definitely feeling the impact of the 24-hour news cycle and social media, in the sense that whenever there is something that people are talking about, they want to be seen as though they are doing something. That way, when voting season comes around, people are like, "Oh yeah, whenever that was the thing, my guy was doing it."
They want attention.
It's performative, right?
Well, yeah.
Because politicians are always playing for whenever the next election rolls around. They have to be able to be like, "I did this, and I did this." And look at this social media post, and look at this interview I did.
And you could argue that someone shooting up a school, that is also performative.
Oh, 100%.
And I think that a lot of that does have to do with the 24-hour news cycle, social media.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I mean, look at interesting topic to talk about. Look at the alt-right. Look at there are people our age who are literally Nazis. Like, I mean, I use literal in the actual definition of the word.
Literal.
Like, they just are Nazis. Like, they're not even like I'm not talking about the Proud Boys and stuff like that. I'm talking like literally, there are people who like hail Hitler and shit in this country and like plan a second American Civil War like purposefully. Like they want to go bomb power plants and stuff.
I mean, the other day I was driving down the street right after church, and there was this car with tons of Satanist bumper stickers, and I'm like, why would you be driving around with that? And then I'm like, well, it's performative. It gets attention. It got my attention, right?
I will say, I'm not sure if it was within relation to the Satanic Temple, that organization. But I actually heavily respect what the Satanic Temple does, because I don't necessarily believe in religiously influenced social policy. And the Satanic Temple, literally their whole thing, they don't actually worship Satan, but they are identify as a social institution that utilizes the rules. Like they basically play by the playbook that a lot of churches play by whenever it comes to implementing policy. Say, for example, the abortion debate, which is a whole different topic. But the Satanic Temple, because you're Christian, believes, at least your average Christian nowadays believes, life began in conception. Therefore, you're killing a life whenever you commit an abortion. Whereas the Satanic Temple's like, we don't believe that. Like religiously, you saying that is violating our religious right. They file that with the court system to get to the Supreme Court, right? In that sense, as a institution for social change for policies they believe in, I think it's very powerful. Do I necessarily support actual Satan worshippers? No, not really. I'm not really down for blood sacrifice and stuff, but they really don't do that. At least from what I've seen about the institution. Of course, this individual of Satan worshipping stickers might not be affiliated with the Satanic Temple, but I just want to put that out there.
I mean, I do think it's interesting, because I think that is a flaw with a lot of Christians. They try too hard to force their religion into these social decisions, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with like the science of politics, because it's not only a science, it's also kind of an art form, right? Because you have to figure out, okay, what kind of decisions should we let people make, and what decisions can we not let people make? And so when it comes to, like, say, homosexuality, as a Christian, I'm opposed to the idea of homosexuality, but I am not opposed to the idea of letting people be homosexuals and to express those ideas. Because while it's not an idea I would ever express, yeah, I do think it's an idea that people should be allowed to express, because I shouldn't be forcing my religious views onto them.
You recognize that you're not the only point of view.
Yeah, and I think most people are that way. And, you know, the way the world is, the way the internet is, it's only the people who have these radical views that really get put into the spotlight. I won't lie. You started talking about the Satanic Temple and how you respected them, and I was like,
well, yeah, because it's like they're not like actually satanic worshipping people, and being an agnostic, I respect how they're utilizing a toolbook that I honestly don't appreciate from a good number of Christian organization groups and blocks to implement social policy that they agree with. I appreciate, because if like in a circumstance, I appreciate this thought, and this is what they're doing. Well, if the Christians don't want the Satanic Temple to institute policies that they could deem religious, then you shouldn't be implementing Christian policies that would be seen as religious, right? That's the whole idea. Basically being like calling out hypocrisy.
yeah,
Like, because Christians don't necessarily want, well, certain more radical policy influencing Christians, they don't want true equality of ideas. They want their ideas to be in, which is fair. Most people do.
well, yeah, that's how I would say everyone is on some level. It just comes down to, like, what are you willing to force on other people?
In this country, it's like, I do believe in the separation of church and state, and I believe that the Satanic Temple, operating as more than a actual temple and more as a legislative, I guess you could say, policy group, I think that I like what they're doing. I like that they're calling out that method of thought.
I think what's bothering me here is just, like, you're talking about all this, like, from the perspective of the Satanic Temple. They're not the only ones, like, doing this and following this philosophy. And so I don't know, like, as a Christian, hearing anything that has to do with satanic, like, why even have the name Satanic Temple?
Well, that's the whole point. It's to make, so you're not the type of person who's gonna be like, I want to implement my policies to make social change. I don't want to implement my religious policies to make social change, and you've accepted that. But there are a number of people who do think that. And I think there are a number of people who are on the fence like I am. And there's plenty of people, okay, let me phrase it like this. There are plenty of people who are like me, but lean more Christian, where it's like, well, I was raised Christian, but I don't really practice, but I would identify as Christian, right? I'd say that's a good number of what Christians are. And I would say a good number of those people would vote for policies that are like, oh, yeah, this is Christian, I should probably vote for that. I think that what's really valuable that the Satanic Temple does is, like, the whole point is they're called the Satanic Temple. It's crazy. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? That's like, a lot of people, like, they take a second look. They're like, what's happening here? That can't be what they're about. And then you look at their website. It's like, we don't actually worship Satan. We support orphanages and certain other things.
Then why call yourself that?
That's the point. They're,
to get your attention?
It is marketing. It is branding. They are trying to be controversial. They are trying to be a hot button.
Okay.
And they succeed because whenever... So basically, imagine this. There was a thing that happened recently with a flag, I think. I think they were flying their flag publicly at a parade or something, and then a Christian group sued them saying, no, I don't want them to be able to do that. That sucks.
You can't sue someone over that, though.
Exactly.
I'm like, what?
They did it because emotionally they were opposed to the idea of a Satanic Temple. But in doing so, they basically hampered their own more pro-policy religious policies. That's the whole point. It's goading people, goading hot-button Christian policy activists into making mistakes, fundamentally. Right? But I would encourage you, like, obviously, like, you don't have to. I know it'd probably make you uncomfortable. Look up their website. Like, look at their platform, because it actually isn't Satan. It really isn't.
I find that funny. I might be amused when I go check that out. If I go check that out, I don't know.
You don't have to, obviously. I know it's like I know you probably don't want that in your fucking search history.
I don't want to,
parents walk upstairs like, Justin, so we saw something in your search history.
We need to have a discussion. They dragged me to the basement, and it turns out they were the ones running it the whole time.
Oh my God. But no, I get why. All I ask you to do is not to, like, openly accept it or anything. Just be like, understand that it's not an actual Satan worshipping temple. And I don't stand in support of Satan worshippers.
Okay.
As a policy standpoint.
I am following you more now. But no, I agree that a big problem with a lot of Christians that I talk to in the day-to-day life is they try too hard to force the Christian ideals into our politics, and that's just not something you can do, because politics as an art form is all about compromise.
It is,
right? And like we were talking about a couple episodes ago, the best way to lead someone into Christianity is to let them wander for a bit, right? Forcing them down this rigid path is just going to make them want to break away from that path more.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have this room to breathe and wander and stuff, then not only do they have room to grow, but they will most likely eventually get there because they have no reason to not want to get there.
And religion is just one of those things foundationally that you can't compromise. Like, if you have a true believer of one faith and a true believer of another faith, they can debate all day long, but they're never actually going to be able to find a middle ground between their ideas. Also, yeah, number one, mommy. I did it on purpose. So it's like if you have a Muslim and a Christian walk into the room, they're going to disagree on whether Jesus is a prophet.
Yeah.
And any policies that stem from their religion are foundationally, if supported by the religion, although they say they're not, are going to be at odds. So I do agree with you. It's like the separation of church and state is a very practical idea.
It is. And it doesn't mean, like, I don't want people to be Christian. I just don't want people to be forced to live like a Christian if they do not want to. Because, and that is what I think a lot of Christians, believe. It's like, they aren't doing this because they want to control people. Most of them probably believe these things and want to implement these policies.
Because they think they're right.
And they think that, they, according to their religion, they know that this is what's best for people. So it is hard to kind of repress that, but you have to give people a chance to grow in their own way, and you have to make room for that. And to make room for that, you have to avoid plugging all these policies in.
I think my biggest area of complaint with specifically conservative Christian policymakers is that they're mostly doing it because politicians, that we just discussed, are performative. They're doing it. They're virtue signaling to get voters to vote for them. But oftentimes they virtue signal in like weird ways, and depending on the political climate, they virtue signal only certain things. A lot of Christian politicians are like, yeah, I'm Christian. I love America. I love beer. I love guns. In that order, right? But they're not like actually, because like if you were to ask them, like, do you support feeding the poor? Do you support orphanages or stuff like that? Like, do you support government spending to just do certain things that I would identify as Christian policies, like making sure, like doing what Jesus was doing, making stuff like that? They'd be like, oh no, that's socialist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a lot of politicians aren't real Christians.
No, a lot, yeah, no.
And of course,
what was so weird was when Trump kept because Trump kept trying to pose himself as Christian, and I was like,
bro,
what? I never really liked Trump.
You seen a picture where he like clubbed a bunch of protesters out of the way so he could hold a Bible upside down for a photo?
I didn't. It sounds exactly like something he'd do, though. And now all I can think about is that photo of Trump playing tennis. So great.
Oh my god.
So great, dude. He got that Trumpy Dumpy.
Leader of the free world.
Pumpy Trumpy Dumpy, dude.
Got the dump truck, apparently.
I mean, and kind of like we talked about last time.
People who are like, yeah, he was our healthiest president. Look at that photo.
Were people actually saying he was our healthiest president?
People were saying that.
Oh man, people would probably find I would not be surprised if Trump got broken, his house got broken into, and people were spraying his spray tan oil on themselves, trying to live forever or something.
100%. People literally worship the ground he walked on, so much so they bought his NFTs. I watched this. Just a quick aside. One of my favorite news series I'd recommend you watch it. It's called News About the Bullshit, and the whole idea is as unbiased news as it could possibly be. It's once a month. It gives you just the highlights, gives you a little bit of depth on the important stories, and then it's gone. It's 30 minutes an episode usually. And every time it references a world leader, it'll talk about it'll say former WWE superstar Donald Trump, or current NFT salesman Donald Trump, former Home Alone actor Donald Trump. It's one of my favorite things. They do it for all of them, of course.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love that. And it just kind of reminds you how, especially nowadays, politics is so performative. And I do think that's just creating such a toxic mentality.
It's always been performative because it's democracy.
It's just so much easier now that with how much media stuff spreads. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, I do think something is going to come very soon that kind of grounds us, because I think we're reaching almost like a terminal point when it comes to the performative stuff with politics, because we've had two extremely controversial presidents in a row. Who it wasn't that half the country disagreed with them, half the country just did not like them at all. And it's becoming more and more like that. And so I think very soon there's going to be a president comes around and grounds us. And honestly, like I think that president might be an independent.
I don't think an independent will be in office, and at least the next couple election cycles, because I think independents, theoretically, I think you're talking about like a centrist independent, like somebody more in the middle.
Yeah. Or maybe even a centrist who like has to bite the bullet and side with the party.
Well, look at Bernie Sanders. Now, he wasn't a centrist. Yeah, he was a Democratic Socialist, but he actually was an independent. Like, he was running for the Democratic nomination as an independent. But he is not a Democratic politician in Congress. I think that an independent could get into office, but only if systemically we change the system to allow for more parties to be involved.
Exactly, like a ranked choice voting.
Yeah, ranked choice voting. Time. Yes, ranked choice voting, please.
I remember you weren't there because you were the one trying to get us all gathered up for the symphony, and you didn't show up the day we went to go buy tickets.
I overslept, I think, or something like that.
Probably. Actually, no, you did. It was you oversleeping. But no, the day we went to go buy these tickets, there's someone walking around MSU's campus saying, hey, we're doing a petition to try to implement ranked choice voting. And at the time I was 17, so I couldn't sign up. I was like, I want to sign that.
Yeah, that's literally what I want, yeah.
I know, ranked choice voting, I just think it would be so much better. And because if we're going to be a representative democracy, then we have to have a more effective way of being represented.
Yeah.
Right? And so ranked choice voting just does so much better job of representing.
Yeah, two things.
Beliefs.
Ranked choice voting, get rid of gerrymandering. Just make it illegal. So, I hate gerrymandering.
I remember playing a game about gerrymandering on Cool Math, and I didn't know what gerrymandering was at the time, but I thought it was cool because it was like, hey.
Is it a cool mathematical concept? Is it kind of cool how like these guys draw these lines to do this? Yeah. Does it suck? Yes. Because have you seen some of these gerrymandered districts? Like one of my favorites.
It has
like a clump here.
And like a really thin line.
A thin line follows a road, follows a highway, has a section here. You know, it's just ridiculous.
It is crazy. Kind of funny though. Kind of funny.
Funny in a ridiculous like how is this happening? Like a dystopian way.
In a dystopian way.
Yeah.
Man, speaking of like dystopia and stuff, I've seen a couple of videos of people kind of like portraying dystopian society, and it's crazy how more and more feasible that seems now. Because like back in the 80s when like they made Blade Runner, like seeing that movie, nowadays it's like, well, that's a very different society from what we have now. And they couldn't predict where things were going back then, so they took a stab at it, and we're pretty off the mark. But it was still a cool movie. But like nowadays, I see some like videos and animations on YouTube of like dystopian societies, and it's creepy how feasible they are. At least with what we know now, because like there's this one video I saw of this guy like watching a like a government sponsored ad for eating insects instead of protein, or eating insects as protein instead of like meat. And then after that, he's in this abstract virtual world that looks really ugly because it's just some corporate art style that's trying to be all minimalist and hip and cool. And then he gets out of the virtual world and he has to deliver a confidential package, kind of like with Uber Eats. He has to deliver this package to a location, and if he fails to do it, he loses all of his social credit. And he's walking out of his apartment building that's filled with suicide nets on the side, and is walking past all these, organizations and businesses trying to market stuff to you. He walks down roads that are named after Disney characters and Marvel characters, and it's like, it's creepy seeing this stuff because like 20 years from now, I can see this sort of happening.
Like corporate apocalypse.
Yeah.
The idea of like a corporate owned society is terrifying to me.
It is.
And in many ways, our society is corporate owned. We just don't really think about it too much.
Yeah.
Like, just because money is politics, money wins things, and corporations own the money.
Yeah.
Right? They influence more social policy than we know.
But I do think the silver lining in that a lot of people don't notice is something we've talked about, is that corporations are, at the end of the day, they're people.
They're people.
And so there are, if we ever do get to a point
well, actually,
like that,
corporations are people. I do want to clarify, because legally, corporations are viewed as people. Did you know that?
I did not. That's
and
cool.
It has a whole bunch of consequences. But they're corporations are composed of human beings.
Yes, and so where I was going with that is like if our society does get to this dystopian like state because of how corporatized everything is, I don't think it would take too long to get out of that. But it is depressing to think that we might get to that state eventually. it might be something we have to get out of. But I do think it would happen eventually. I think what's interesting nowadays is, thanks to the internet, capitalism is easier than ever.
Oh yeah.
Like the American dream is easier nowadays, because a lot of people say it's harder. Just with these big corporations, but I disagree. I think it's easier just because it's so much easier to spread information, to get the word out about your business, and to provide people with services. It's just the way in which these services are provided is shifting dramatically, especially thanks to computer science. And that's one of the reasons we're going into computer science, just because it's going to touch, as we've talked about, it's going to touch so many more fields until eventually it touches every field.
If you get a computer science degree and you're a decent coder, if the video game stuff doesn't work out, you could get a job like anywhere.
Yeah, and that's why I'm getting the degree, because I'm like, well, and that's why I love Joy's program, because it's not, yes, it has this kind of game dev label on top of it, but it's like 80% computer science, 20% game dev / art / computer animation courses, because it's not really about specifically how do you make a video game. It's let's learn everything about computers and then gear that toward making a game. So it's computer science first, game development second, as opposed to the other way around, which is how it should be, right? Because I see lots of things like Full Sail University, like, oh, we'll teach you how to make a game. You won't know exactly what you're doing. You won't know all the processes in the computer that are going on.
At the end of the day, you have to be able to code to make a video game. But at the end of the day, I will say, it's interesting because you do have to be able to code to make a video game. But more and more so, people are able to make video games without being able to code.
Well, I think, because traditional coding, yes, but I think what they are doing is, in essence, coding. It's just at a higher level. It's more abstract.
Yeah.
And that's really how coding has always been. We've just been abstracting. Just because it makes it easier to do these things. And again, like, if coding in and of itself is becoming easier, then that just opens the doors even more for people to find ways to build their own businesses, build their own companies, build their own products, distribute, stuff like that. So, I don't know, I find myself, I mean, I'm an optimist in many respects, but especially when it comes to, like, a societal scale, why I'm wary of the dystopian possibilities. I don't mull over them too much, because I'm like, well, even if we do get to a state like that, it'll be pretty easy to get out, I would think, anyway, right now. Mark my words, 20 years from now, I'm completely wrong. We're all just, like, sucking on Elon Musk's giant robotic toes.
I was not expecting that.
You were closing your eyes while you were laughing, and I can only imagine that you were picturing it in vivid detail.
I actually was.
It wasn't.
I really was. Like, I definitely was.
And it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a laugh of splendor.
Well, it was a laugh. You know what it was a laugh of? It was a laugh of, holy shit.
Ecstasy.
I could see that happening. And I literally could see it happening. And I don't want to be.
You don't want to be.
Man.
I was going to start the episode with this. I totally forgot. 19 now. That's cool.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
I know I texted you that and all that. But,
you did.
Congratulations on making another trip around the sun.
Thank you. The way I've put it, since I am now a prime number of years old, I am in my prime, so you better watch out.
Are you not going to be in your prime tomorrow? Or next year?
Nope. I'll not be in my prime. Not until I'm 23.
Wait.
Yeah. I'm going to have 3 years of just Justin. And then I'm going to have 1 year of Justin. Yeah, then I have to wait like 6 years till the next one. I'm like, well.
Yeah, I'm just in John stage right now.
You are in the John stage.
My back is quiet.
Your back is quiet. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing.
And one day it'll be loud again, and it'll be louder than yours.
It took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out where you were going with that.
It's my favorite little pun joke thing.
Favorite little pun joke thing.
I think we're at an hour or something.
Hour and 3 minutes, yeah.
And then we'll call it soon, partially because I'm Diego Lumino's. I'm
okay.
super stuffed up. I'm also hungry, so.
You're also hungry, and I do have a couple things to go to today. That's why I'm wearing my Drew shirt. There's a lacrosse game I'm going to be going to.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
By the way, this is just kind of like personal life stuff, but I've got all my application stuff in, so I'm going to be getting the ball rolling and going there next year.
That is awesome. I'm really glad to hear it. It's going to be awesome having you there.
I probably will be there in the fall. I'm going to talk to them and see if they want me to have my associates first or not. I might be there in the fall, having taken classes in the start. We'll see how it works out, but I'll be there either in the fall or spring of next year.
That is super duper hype.
Hell yeah, brother.
And there's something I was going to touch on really quick, but now don't. Oh yeah, the new Ant-Man movie. Saw that on my birthday. It was pretty good. It was a lot better than a lot of the more recent Marvel films. It feels like they're starting to return.
It feels like it was cooking. Like it had been cooking for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely had, because I think the director, I think Feige was his name or something. He was like, "Yeah, I'm sick of the Ant-Man movies being seen as kind of like the B-roll of Marvel, or it's like they don't really take any kind of."
The first Ant-Man was really good though.
It was. Well, when he said B-roll, he meant like they don't seem to like impact the greater universe very much. So he wanted one that had a big impact on the universe, and that was supposed to be Quantumania, and to introduce like Kang the Conqueror and stuff. But it definitely had the lighthearted tone of the first two. It was a bit more serious, but they still had plenty of fantastic jokes in there. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. Good movie to see with friends, and it wasn't like the best Marvel movie. At all.
Isn't Marvel weird that those like what other franchise just has that many movies in it?
It's crazy. Well, now all the shows and stuff.
Yeah, you just like it's just like they literally have taken this whole Marvel universe thing and ran with it.
Yeah.
It's just it's bonkers to really think about how much content you can consume and stay inside. Like you could watch like 3 hours of shows a day for a month. It's still probably not to be through all the Marvel content that there is.
There's a lot out there.
Mm-hmm.
And but no, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Like I'm not any expert movie critic, but it held my attention. The stakes were reasonable, because Marvel, the thing with Marvel that usually bothers me are the stakes. They either make the stakes way too big, like, oh, the whole universe is going to collapse unless we get the freaking frog of destiny or something, or the stakes like mean nothing. So why should I care about the movie at all? With this one, I think they got the stakes just right. And another thing that I loved about this movie is that the things that happened made just enough sense to go without explanation, but they're still super weird. But because of like the whole filter of, oh, this is going on in the quantum realm, like that made me go. It made it so much easier to accept a lot of the nonsense that was going on. Whereas other Marvel movies, like they either try too hard to ground themselves, and explain too much, or they don't explain enough. Because I think that's what happened with Multiverse of Madness. It didn't make sense why almost anything in the story was going on, and I thought it was stupid. I really did not like Multiverse of Madness. It was a huge letdown. So, all that to say, that was one thing I did this week. Celebrated that with some friends for my birthday. Went to see the new Ant-Man movie, and it was good.
Yeah.
It was good. Not great, but good. Solid 7 out of 10 from Cosmic Crow Critiques.
Yeah, Cosmic Crow critiques like
Cosmic
that.
Crow
CCC. No, CKC. Well, no, do you use
Cosmic Crow Creations is CROW.
Oh.
And like Loudest Crow, so. Oh yeah, my main channel is Cosmic Crow MC Gaming. You better subscribe.
My main channel is Donkey Kong Feet Pick 69.
69. What happened to 68? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
You don't bring that up. Don't fucking bring that up around me. You know that. We talked about that. Don't you dare fucking talk about that in my presence.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
Do you hear me, man? No, this is serious moment here. I don't hear anything about 68 ever again from you. Okay? All right. Anyway, Donkey Kong Feet Picks. Fuck. You ruined me.
I really shouldn't have brought it up. That's on me.
Okay. I'm gonna be fixing the animatronic that is just off screen. Gotta do some wiring.
Keep those hands off my wires, boy.
You're sentient, I promise. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about existence. Don't go there. You're sentient.
Man, now you're reminding me of philosophy of mind again.
Yeah.
We're talking about like functionalism and stuff.
Dude, you exist. But I don't exist. I'm a figment of your imagination. Does that mean that me saying you exist actually means anything?
No.
Alright.
No.
Alright, people. This is a goodbye for now.
This is goodbye for now, and this time I'm going to make sure I actually stop recording.